A very good afternoon to our esteemed dignitaries and my faculty colleagues of Superhouse Education Foundation. On behalf of Allen House Colleges situated at Ruma, Kanpur, I, Priyanka Antarvedi, Assistant Professor, Allen House Business School, welcome you all to this webinar on debunking myths of COVID-19 in children. Now, before we go ahead, please allow me to present a few lines about Allen House Colleges. Allen House Colleges, established under the aegis of Superhouse Education Foundation in 2009, owing to its consistent endeavor, has been ranked as the 4th topmost private engineering institute in the state by Education World India in 2020-21. It has also been awarded as the most outstanding institute for promoting industry-academia interface at the 16th World Education Summit 2020. Allen House Institute of Technology offers 6 BTech courses in streams like Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning, Computer Science and Engineering, Mechanical Engineering, Electrical and Electronics Engineering, Electronics and Communication Engineering, and Civil Engineering. It also offers diploma courses in Civil Engineering, Electrical Engineering, and Mechanical Engineering production. Allen House Business School, ranked as the 4th top emerging BBA institute by Times B School Survey 2020-21, offers BBA and BCA programs. The master's program in business administration is offered through Allen House Institute of Management, ranked as the 6th top emerging MBA institute in India by Times B School Survey 2020-21. When the nation is calling for closures and lockdowns in response to the COVID-19 crisis, it is understandable that leaders are making health decisions for all of us to keep us away from the life-threatening risk. However, there are details about the spread of this virus that need to be made clear to the public. So to guide us all and to face this challenging time, we have invited our expert speaker, Dr. Shravan Mehra, who shall be sharing valuable views on debunking myths of COVID-19 in children. Now, before I invite our esteemed speaker of today, I would like to welcome our director, Dr. Ruby Chawla ma'am, and other dignitaries, and our honorable campus director, Dr. Bhagwan Jogwani sir, to this session. Now, I would like to take this privilege to welcome our esteemed speaker, who shall be sharing his exclusive perspective on debunking myths of COVID-19 in children. But before I invite him, I would like to quote few lines about our guest speaker. Dr. Shravan Mehra was a former consultant at Apollo Delhi. He did his post-graduation from CMC Ludhiana. He further did his specialization in critical care from Sir Gangaram Hospital and Apollo Hospital, Delhi. He did his fellowship in pediatric critical care and neonatology, in which he was given the gold medal by the Indian Academy of Pediatrics. He was also awarded the Satya Gupta Award for research by the Delhi Academy of Pediatrics. I now invite Dr. Shravan Mehra to address the audience on the given topic.
Good afternoon. I hope I'm audible. Should I screen share now? Share my screen?
Yes, sir, you may. You are absolutely audible.
Okay, so good afternoon to everybody. It's a privilege to be here today. I would like to thank Dr. Chawla for inviting me for this session. And I do hope that the information that I can give you today would be of benefit to all of you. Now, the topic that I'm going to discuss about is COVID management and debunking its actual myths in May 2021. Why I mentioned May 2021 is because COVID is an evolving disease. What we had recommended in June last year was not applicable in December. What we said we can do in December is not applicable today. So maybe whatever I tell you today may be outdated by the time we get back into June 2021. But as per today, what is recommended as per the research which has so far been conducted, and as per all the studies that we have, I am going to going to help you clarify all your doubts and all your myths. So just to go ahead with my presentation, we have a current pandemic in the 2021 wave. We have to understand why did it happen and why is it different from what we had faced in 2020. So what happened in January this year is that we all declared victory. Our health minister declared victory, our prime minister declared victory, and overall there was a lot of complacency all around. There was widespread relaxation of the COVID appropriate behavior because all of us were tired of being tied up at home for about a year. And in January, we thought that we were out of COVID. There were only about 7,000 or 8,000 cases every day all over the country. And the number of deaths were down. So we all started having political rallies, Kumbh Melas, marriages, social get-togethers, etc. And all this COVID inappropriate behavior was probably responsible for the spread of the virus, and the virus which is now mutated and is seen around us. So was this wave unexpected by our experts? Why did we let our guard down in January this year? Well, I will not say that it was unexpected because we had certain telltale signs. In UK, we had the number of cases rising because of the UK variant. Even though the vaccine had come out, there was a South African variant which declared that the Serum Institute, Covishield, was not affected against this strain. The number of deaths were rising in the US again. So it wasn't totally unexpected, and probably it was going to reach India sometime or the other. Now, there are certain new strains which have come into India. One is the B117 strain, which is actually the UK strain. And then we have our homegrown strain, which is the B1167. Both these strains are different from what we had last year, because last year if one member of the household got COVID and we isolated that particular family member, he probably was the only person who suffered from COVID and the others remained unaffected. However, this year we have seen that even in good families which have big houses and they are able to isolate early and isolate with a separate room and a separate bathroom, still the household attack rates are nearly 100%. I've had a number of families who've come to me who had 7, 8, 10, maybe even 15 people, including the servants, guards, etc., who have all had COVID. So this particular strain is obviously the UK strain as well as the Indian homegrown strain is obviously a little more infectious, a little more, I would mean a lot more infectious because the household attack rates are 100%. There's been a massive spike in cases over 4 lakhs a day. We are down to about 3,30,000, but that also may be attributed to underreporting. And the spike in deaths to 3,800 to 4,000 a day continue. Distribution is the same. So this particular data came out 2 days back, and if you notice that we have two graphs, we have the blue graph, the bars and the orange bars. And if you see the distribution of the cases that is seen as per today in 2021 May, it is approximately the same. So it's not that the children are getting affected more or the youngsters are getting affected more and the elderly are not. The distribution is more or less the same. If I show you the number of deaths, because a lot of people have this misconception that the number of deaths in the young, in the children, in the teenagers, and in the people in the age group of 20 to 30 years is more. Again, if I look at this distribution from 2020 and 2021, you can make out that it is more or less the same. But then why are we always complaining, or why are we reporting so many cases in the young? Is because the denominator is high. Earlier on, we had 50,000 cases. So even if 2 or 3% were children, the number was very small. But today, because we have 4 lakh cases, 4.5 lakh cases, even if we have 2% of the children being affected, the number is much more as compared to last year. So the denominator is large. However, the distribution is more or less the same. The second thing I would like to mention is that in the elderly, that means the population above 45, nearly 30% are also vaccinated. So maybe that also is contributing to the rise in cases in the 40 to 50 to 40 age group category. And also the people in the age group of 30 to 50 again. So probably that may also be a contributing factor as to why we get youngsters and younger people being affected more as compared to adults. Now, COVID is a disease where we get mild in majority of symptoms, majority of patients, 80-85%. We get a moderate disease in about 10 to 15%, and we get a severe or a critical disease in 5%. This is in the adults. However, if you look at children, in children, the numbers are a little different. We get a mild disease in 95% of the children, a moderate disease in 4% of the children, and a severe disease in 1% of the affected children. But however, because the number of children are more who are being infected, because like I mentioned, the number of total infected are more, even that 1% is now working up to be a sizable number. And in Maharashtra last month, we had over 1 lakh children who were affected. Maharashtra itself had over 60 lakh children, 60 lakh people affected, but children were over 1 lakh. So the number has definitely gone up because the denominator has gone up as well. Why do children fare better? So we get this question which is asked very often. One reason is that this particular coronavirus binds to the ACE receptors. And in children, these receptors are fortunately lesser. So because the binding sites are lesser, the symptoms in children are lesser as compared to adults who have more ACE receptors. The second thing is that there are a lot of other coronaviruses which are there, and children get a number of viral infections during childhood by going to school, by going to the playgrounds, etc. So they have some amount of immunity to the coronavirus as compared to adults. They also have immunity because of vaccination, because of BCG and MMR, etc. So they have certain innate immunity. The number of lymphocytes in children are more, and more importantly, the comorbidities are lesser in children. So if I have a child and I have an adult, the adult may have diabetes, the adult may have hypertension, the adult may have some kind of a lung problem. Children are mostly morbidity free. They have fresh, healthy lungs. They are not smokers. They don't have damaged hearts. They don't have damaged lungs. They don't have damaged kidneys and livers. So their system can fight the infection better as compared to an elderly person who has a number of comorbidities and the lungs are not that healthy. So fortunately, the children are faring better. And the reason is that they have slightly better immunity. Now, let me come to the disease itself. The pattern of the disease in children and in adults remains the same. Earlier on last year, the incubation period, that means from the onset of exposure of the infection to the onset of symptoms, was longer. We would, after exposure, get symptoms at 9, 10, 11 days. But with the newer variants, the incubation period has become shorter. That means that if I get exposed to the virus on day 1, I will have symptoms by day 4 or day 5 in majority of cases. Now, I would also like to mention another thing is that you are maximum infectious on day 1. That means that when I develop symptoms on day 5, for example, I got exposed to the infection on the 1st of the month, and on the 5th day, I developed fever, a cough, a cold, maybe a little bit of headache or body ache. On this particular day, I am most infectious to the people around me. I am not infectious on the 1st, because on the 1st, when I got the virus exposure, the amount of virus in my body was less, so I'm not infectious. But by the 4th or the 5th, because the quantity of the virus has gone up, I am now more infectious. Now, generally, the infection can be transmitted to the people around us 2 days prior to the onset of symptoms and maximum for 3 to 4 days after onset of symptoms. So let me repeat this. I got exposed to somebody with a cough and a cold on the 1st of May. I became symptomatic on the 5th. But on the 3rd, on the 4th, I was already spreading the virus to people in my family. So if I start wearing a mask on the 5th, I have already spread the virus to every family member of my house. That is why we are getting the 100% attack rate. We isolate on the 5th, that's all right. From the 5th onwards, we will not spread it. But because we have been with our family on the 3rd and the 4th, we have already spread it. The other problem that we get is that when we get a slight symptom like a body ache or a headache, we brush it off by saying, "ये तो सिर्फ मौसम की वजह से है, या मैं बाहर गया था, exertion हो गई, इसके कारण मुझे थोड़ा सा body ache हो रहा है." And we don't isolate ourselves on the 5th. So we continue to spread the virus on the 5th and the 6th and the 7th. Now, when my fever starts going up to 101, on the 7th, I go and do a test. It comes positive and I start isolating myself from day 7. So I've already had day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, where I have spread the virus to every family member. I am trying to suggest to you is that as soon as you are symptomatic, if you have any symptom which is different from your regular good health, so let me carry on with our discussion. Like I said, this particular disease is a very different disease as compared to what we have. And in this particular disease, there are two phases. There is phase 1 and then there is phase 2. The phase 1 of this disease is for 0 to 7 days, which is like any viral phase. Now, what happens in this particular phase is you get symptoms of any viral infection. That means that when you have phase 1 of the disease, you get any symptoms of viral infection like fever, cough, cold, body ache, headache. You get a lot of muscle pain. You get a lot of symptoms of diarrhea, vomiting, etc. You know, they say that in COVID, the symptoms can be anything. Yeah, you just move ahead. Yeah, the next please. Yeah, next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so like I said, so go back to the last slide. Yeah, so 0 to 7 days is like any viral illness. Now, what happens in a viral illness is that you get high-grade fever, you get cough, you get cold, you get body ache, you get headache, you get symptoms of viral infection. Now, this particular phase is where the virus is replicating very fast and there is no immune response as of now. In this particular phase, the symptoms will be like any viral illness which you have contracted in the past over many years as well. Now, generally, a viral illness gets okay in 5 to 7 days. So normally at 5 to 7 days, you start feeling better and you recover. So 80 to 85% of the patients who suffer from COVID without much treatment will get better by day 7 and they will be fine. However, in a small percentage, in 10 to 15%, they will go into the second phase, which is the 7 to 14 day stage of this disease. Now, what we are worried about is this second stage of the disease because this is the hyperinflammation stage of the disease. In the second stage of the disease, I call it the Kismat phase because who will go into the second stage is unpredictable. We have had young, robust people going into the second stage, and we've had people who are 80, 85 years old with comorbidities who remain well after 4 or 5 days of the disease and are perfectly healthy, and they don't move on to the second phase of the disease. Now, what happens in the second phase of the disease is that our immune system itself gets triggered off because of the virus. What triggers it off, the cytokine storm, we do not know. We have some understanding about it today, but as of now, what we feel is this is more genetic and Kismat related as compared to the first phase. So the first phase is the virus phase and the second phase is the immune phase. Why are these two phases important is because in the first phase, we are trying to kill the virus and therefore we will recover. In the second phase, we are trying to suppress our immune system so that the immune system goes down. And as a result of that, the inflammation goes down. So there are two different phases. Medicines are aimed at each phase separately. Can I have the next slide? Okay. Now, majority of people will remain in mild, but some patients will go into moderate. Now, who are the people who will go into moderate is generally seen if you have comorbidities. So if your age is more than 60, if you have lung, liver, kidney diseases, if you are diabetic, if you are hypertensive, if you have heart conditions, you've had a surgery recently, there are slightly more chances that you will go into moderate. And if your Kismat is bad, then from the moderate, you will go into the severe. I will like people to remember 4 figures. 24 and 94 and 30 and 90. Now, any person with a mild disease will have fever, headache, body ache, but the saturation will be more than 94 and the breathing will be less than 24. So the person will breathe comfortably less than 24 times. Normally, an adult breathes at the rate of 12 to 14 times in a minute. So if your breathing has gone more than 24, or if your saturation that you have measured has gone less than 94, it means that you are now getting into the moderate phase of the disease and you should start looking at starting oxygen, start looking at giving steroids, start looking at giving heparin. I want you to remember these two figures. Now, the other two figures are 30 and 90. That means that you are now in big trouble. Your breathing is more than 30 and your saturation is less than 90. For you people, the figure which is important is 24 and 94, because beyond this, you will be in the hospital and the doctors would be able whether you're moving into the severe variety of the disease or not. Generally, in the mild phase, you may be slightly symptomatic, but your breathing is less and your saturation is above 94. While using a pulse oximeter at home, you have to remember two things. One is that the current pulse oximeters are Chinese. Sometimes the reading is not good. Lots of times we get a telephone call saying the saturation is 60, 65 on the pulse oximeter, but the person is sitting up, is comfortable, is breathing properly. So be rational, be practical, reattach the pulse oximeter to a different finger, wait for 1 to 2 minutes and then take the highest reading. I again repeat, you need to take the highest reading. So if I attach a pulse oximeter, it will show you many readings, 90, 91, 92, 88, and ultimately you will get 97, 98. So you are meant to take the highest reading, not the lowest reading. Let the pulse oximeter remain attached for approximately 1 to 2 minutes. Let it pick up your pulse and your saturation. Give it time. Don't panic that within 30 seconds it came as 88 or 85 and now I need to rush to the hospital. Give it time. Give it 2, 3, 4 minutes. In addition to this, you're also meant to do something which is known as a 6-minute walk test. Now, this is very important. We have seen that there is a particular stage between mild to moderate disease on day 5 to day 7, where your saturations are 95, 96. That means your lungs are holding up okay right now. But when you exert or when you walk, your body cannot cope up with the increased oxygen demand, and as a result, your saturation drops. So what is suggested is that if you are in a mild disease on day 4, day 5, and your saturation is 95, 96 borderline, then you need to walk around in your house, not a very active walk. You can walk around for about 5-6 minutes and then measure your saturation again. If your saturation drops by 2 or 3, that means you were 96 and now it has come down to 94, 93. That means that you are going into the moderate phase of the disease. We need to think about starting remdesivir. We need to look for a hospital bed. You are going to be falling into trouble. Can I go on to the next slide, please? Okay. So, like I said, we are concerned about mild and moderate, not severe, because severe is going to be managed by doctors in the hospital. All our questions are related to, agar mujhe mild disease hai, so how do I know that I will not go into moderate and I will not require oxygen? So there are some telltale signs. Suppose your fever is very high. It's okay to have high-grade fever in the first 3 days, but if your fever is more than 101 for more than 3 days, or if your fever continues to be remain for 5 to 7 days, normally a viral infection, your fever should be down by day 5. But I continue to have 100, 99, 101 fever on day 5, day 6. It means that there is inflammation in my body. My alarm should be up. Third is if there is a biphasic fever. The patient says that my fever went down after day 4, day 5, but on day 7, day 8, I've started getting fever again. Biphasic fever means again there is inflammation in your body. So you have to understand that fever can happen because of the virus, and fever can also happen because of the second phase, which is the inflammation phase. So initially, if the fever is there, it's okay. But if the fever is staying high grade, if the fever is prolonged, and if the fever disappears but comes back again, that means the inflammation is persisting. In these 3 conditions, you are meant to be aware that you may move into the moderate phase of the disease. See, for you people, it is important to recognize what is mild and when am I moving from mild to moderate. Severe, don't think about it because you do not need to manage severe at home. You have to catch yourself when you're going from mild to moderate before you deteriorate. So if your saturation is borderline 94, if your respiratory breathing rate is more than 20, 24, if your fever is staying high for more than 3 days, if your fever is prolonged, if you have a fever which has reappeared on the 6th, 7th, 8th day, if you have excessive exhaustion, normally you are tired with COVID, but if you are excessively exhausted, you can't even walk to the toilet, you're feeling so much exhaustion. And if you have other comorbidities, like I said, if you are diabetic, if you are hypertensive, if you have a chronic lung, kidney, liver problem, then that means that you need to be extremely careful. You need to get in touch with your doctor. You are at high risk of moving to moderate disease. Can I have the next slide, please? Next, yeah. So now, suppose I consider myself to be at risk. My fever is not coming down. My fever is persisting. What should I do? I should carry out tests on day 5. Now these tests are, you have a long list of tests. I get a prescription or a call or a WhatsApp message from a patient who's done 30 tests and sends me lists and lists of tests. They spend 15,000 rupees doing tests. Remember, all tests are not important. You can do tests, but if you keep them to a minimum, you will get the same information from 2 or 3 tests as compared to a long number of tests. So the first thing is, when should tests be done? Should I do tests on day 1 of being diagnosed? There is no point to doing tests on day 1 of being diagnosed, because on day 1, 99% your tests are going to be normal. You are unnecessarily subjecting yourself to a test. You are spending money and you're wasting your money. You should do your test by day 4 or day 5. The current recommendation says that if you have a mild disease and you are very, very comfortable, then you do not need to run tests at all. But if by day 4, day 5, your fever is not breaking, if by day 4, day 5, your saturations are a little borderline, you can carry out blood tests. There are many tests which people are doing these days, out of which 3 are important, which is the CBC, which is number 2 is the CRP, and the third is the D-dimer. There are 3 other tests which are expensive, like ferritin, IL-6 and LDH. I will just like to talk a little bit on every test, because normally you are getting these reports at home and you do not know how to interpret them. So how do we interpret tests for COVID? So the first test, CBC. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, okay. So in the CBC, you have a number of parameters. What you have to look at is something known as your WBC count. Your WBC count is your white blood cell count, and this is the army which is going to be fighting against our infection. Now in COVID, it has been seen that the lymphocyte fraction of our WBC tends to go down. Our WBC have 2 main soldiers, one is neutrophil and one is lymphocyte. The lymphocytes go down in COVID. If they go down a lot, that means that you're going to have a slightly moderate disease. But if they go down moderately, you're going to be safe. So, for example, a particular patient on day 4, day 5 shows me a report where the total WBC count is 6,000, and out of which 50% are neutrophils and 50% are lymphocytes. The ratio is 1:1. If the ratio is 1:1 or 1:2, I can tell the patient that you are probably not going to go into moderate or severe disease. But if the lymphocytes are suppressed, they are less, and the ratio now goes in favor of, say, a second patient, neutrophils 80% and lymphocytes 20%, a 4:1 ratio, a 5:1 ratio, that means that this patient will go into moderate disease. So by looking at the NL ratio, the CBC is a test which costs about 200 to 300 rupees. We get the report within half an hour to 1 hour. I look at the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. Any ratio more than 4 or 5 means the patient can go into a more severe disease. Can I have the next slide, please? The second test is CRP. The CRP is a marker of something going wrong in our body. Anything which goes wrong in our body, the CRP will rise. So the CRP will rise in the first phase of the disease when we have the virus phase, and the CRP will also rise in the second phase of the disease when we have the inflammation phase. That means that anything wrong in our body can be measured by doing a quantitative CRP, again a very cheap test for rupees 200 to 300 rupees. Normally the CRP should be less than 5 to 10. But if it is more, it means that there is a problem. And if it is very high, it means that there is going to be a moderate to severe disease. Normally, if it is more than 40, it means that you will require oxygen, you will require remdesivir, and you will require steroids. So a CRP which is more than 40 is generally a bad sign. Normal CRP less than 5. If you are 10 to 15, you're probably borderline, but as the CRP rises, the more the risk of getting into trouble. The second thing is, suppose I have a CRP which is 40 and I start steroids. Within 48 to 72 hours, I can measure the CRP again. If the CRP has come down to half, 50% drop in the CRP, I can assure you your patient will not require ventilation, will not go into a cytokine storm. So what I'm suggesting is that your CRP was 40 at day 5 or day 6. I started steroids, which can be started at home. After 2 or 3 days, I measure your CRP again. If the CRP has come down to 20 from 40, 50% fall, I can guarantee you that your patient will not deteriorate. So by doing 2 tests for 600 rupees, I can predict what is happening. It also, I would like to point out that serial CRPs give us more information as compared to one report. For example, it was 40. I started steroids, it became 60. I know that you're going into cytokine storm. Please go into the hospital. You will need oxygen. You will need treatment. But by starting steroids, it has come down to 20. I am sure you are improving. You will not go into a cytokine storm and you will recover. So by doing a serial CRP, I can mark and see whether you are responding to treatment or not responding to treatment. Next slide, please. The third test, which is important, is D-dimer. Now remember, COVID is a disease where the lungs are being damaged by 3 processes. First is the virus itself. Second process is by the inflammation of our body, so our own inflammatory response. And the third process whereby our body gets damaged is because of micro thrombosis in our small blood vessels. So somehow what this COVID does is that it initiates our coagulation and we get micro thrombi in multiple blood vessels, small capillary blood vessels in the lungs. And as a result of that, the pneumonia worsens. Remember, a normal pneumonia is easy to treat. So we've had pneumonias in patients before as well. But the COVID pneumonia is different because it also has something known as a thrombotic phase. So there are 3 ways in which the lungs are damaged. 1, by the virus. 2, they are damaged by our inflammation, and 3, by our thrombosis. So to monitor the third phase, we do the D-dimer. Normally, the D-dimer should be less than 0.5, but if it is more than 1, then we can consider to give low molecular weight heparin. Now, these 3 tests are easily done. They are not very expensive, and they will guide me. I need to give my patient remdesivir, oxygen, steroids, and heparin. So 3 tests are good enough. I don't need to rush into a plethora of other tests. Can I have the next slide? There are some tests which I would just like to inform you what they are. Now they do an IL-6. Now IL-6 is a very expensive test. It is similar to CRP. It is like a fancy elder brother of the CRP. It measures the same inflammation in our body. It is not different from CRP. It's just adding on to the cost. Now the IL-6, if it is again like CRP, going into a cytokine. The IL-6 has to be done in a very specific way. It has to reach the lab within 2 or 3 hours of being processed. Number 2, if the vial which was being taken to the lab is shaken because the delivery boy is shaking it on his motorcycle, the IL-6 leaks out of the cells and reaches into the blood. Lots of patients who are stable have a normal CBC, have a normal CRP, have a normal D-dimer, but they tell me our IL-6 is 20 or 25. Sir, should I start giving steroids? Should I start thinking of tocilizumab? Should I start thinking of getting admitted because my IL-6 is high? No, because probably the sample wasn't processed correctly. So if you are going to do an IL-6, it should ideally be done in the hospital setting and only when you need it, because you can get a wrong reading of IL-6, which can be misguiding and misleading to over-treatment. So IL-6 can be done. It's expensive. It costs around 2,000 to 5,000 depending on the lab where you get it done. But according to me, you don't need it unless you are very, very unwell. Next slide, please. 2 or 3 other tests. One is ferritin. Ferritin is also a marker of inflammation and LDH is also a marker of cell death. So a ferritin more than 700 or an LDH more than 450 mean that you are going to be sick. But we have already ascertained that with your CRP. Unless we have a normal CRP and a sick patient, we don't need to do IL-6, ferritin or LDH. So according to me, the 3 tests which should be done, I repeat, should be a CBC, should be a CRP, and should be a D-dimer. Please, you do not need to do a ferritin and LDH and IL-6 unless you are very sick in the hospital. Not on day 1, not on day 4, not on day 5. You may do it subsequently if you're very sick in the hospital and the doctor is thinking of starting tocilizumab or thinking of putting you onto the ventilator. Yes, in those situations, it's the doctor's call. But you should not go to the lab and waste your money getting these tests done. Now, about CT scans. Remember, a CT scan does not help us in the treatment at all. I will start oxygen for you if you have a drop in saturation. I will start remdesivir for you if you have a drop in saturation. I will start steroids for you if you have a high CRP. I will start heparin low molecular weight for you, that is an anticoagulant, if you have a high D-dimer. Then why am I doing a CT scan and subjecting you to so much radiation? AIIMS, recently even Dr. Guleria had come on national television and said that AIIMS has stopped doing CT scans in patients today. Even PGI Chandigarh has stopped doing CT scans because they don't add to our information. They just cause a panic. The patient is fine and they go ahead and do a CT scan because their neighbor did a CT scan and the CT scan shows a value of 11 or 12 in a patient who's saturating 98% with a borderline CRP. I'm not going to admit this patient. I'm not going to start steroids. I'm going to wait and watch. So the CT scan is not helping me alter my treatment in any way. It's only causing a confusion and causing a panic in the minds of the patients. I can see you clinically with 2 or 3 tests which cost 600-700 rupees. I do not need to rush into a CT scan. If, however, you do a CT scan, when should you do it? You can do a CT scan maybe on day 7 or day 8 when you are confused regarding the progression of the disease. But there is no point doing a CT scan on day 1, day 2, day 3 because the scan will be normal. Remember, in the viral phase of the disease, the CT scan is normal. It's only in the immune phase of the disease that the CT scan gets abnormal. I've had patients who had a CT scan on day 1 of diagnosis, then on day 5, then they got admitted in the hospital, they got it done again. And then on discharge to see how things are, they got it done again. So they've had 4 CT scans. They've had tons and tons of radiation exposure. They may recover from COVID, but now they're going to suffer or be at a higher risk for developing cancer. So remember, if you do a CT scan, there are very, very few indications. Leave it to the doctor to decide. Don't go to the lab and get a CT scan done. If a CT scan shows your score less than 8, it means that you have very mild disease. 8 to 15 would mean that you have moderate disease, and more than 15 would mean you have a severe disease. But at the same time, I would like to point out that we can monitor these things by clinical assessment rather than doing a scan. So reserve a scan only for a tough case where you can't decide what to do. Don't get a scan done at the drop of a hat. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, now we go into treatment options: mild, moderate, and severe disease. Remember, majority of children stay in mild, very few go into moderate, and extremely few, 1%, go into severe. Majority of adults, 80-85% of adults remain mild, 10 to 15% moderate, and 5% severe. Remember, for mild disease, practically you need no treatment. I know the UP government sends you a packet which has n number of medicines. I had a colleague of mine who's not a doctor, a friend, who had a very, very mild COVID, very mild, and he was prescribed 18 medicines to take for 7 days. So you will probably fall sick of over medication rather than recover. What has clearly been stated today is that mild disease requires no treatment, especially in children. Mild disease requires a good diet, lots of water, coconut water. In addition to that, rest and nothing else. You can use a paracetamol or crocin medicine like a Dolo 650 can be given SOS if you get fever or if you get body ache. But other than that, a mild disease has no treatment requirement. Number 2, suppose you go into a moderate disease. That means that now you have oxygen requirement, or your CRP is high, or you find that your D-dimers are going high. You're falling into the moderate category, and now you need to get admitted in the hospital. Or maybe if you're borderline, mild to moderate, and your CRP is high, you can start with steroids at home. Like I said, this disease is caused by 3 reasons. Number 1, virus. So you can give an antiviral known as remdesivir. Inflammation, that means your body is reacting against your own body. You can give a steroid. And coagulation, that means microthrombi in our blood vessels. You can give yourself heparin. So there are 3 causes of lung damage and there are 3 medicines. I always say there are 3 tests. Number 1, CBC. Number 2, CRP. Number 3, D-dimer. Number 2, there are 3 causes of damage. Number 1, virus. Number 2, inflammation. Number 3, clotting. And there are 3 medicines: antiviral, remdesivir. Number 2, anti-inflammation, steroids, and anti-clotting, heparin. So 3 tests, 3 medicines. If you're doing so much, in majority, 99% of your cases, you will be fine. All the extra tests and extra medicines don't really help. Can I go on to the next slide? Okay. So like I mentioned, so you have antivirals, remdesivir, you have anti-inflammatory medicines, steroids, you have anticoagulants, you have heparin. 3 causes, 3 medicines, 3 tests. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, a lot of patients will be started on vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. Remember, these medicines have no protective effect on COVID. If you're having 4 lakh people suffering from COVID every day, new cases, at least 2 lakh were on vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. And they were probably taking these for the last 6, 8, 10 months, and still they got COVID. So they are not magic pills. They can be taken. I don't want to be the devil not to prescribe any vitamins, but remember, they have no role in COVID. They are like sugar candies. You can take them, but they don't have benefits. Remember, these are also medicines. For example, if you give zinc, zinc will cause gastritis, will cause bloating, will cause acidity. If you give excessive vitamin D, I've seen patients receiving lots and lots of vitamin D. It can cause raised benign intracranial hypertension. So it can cause side effects. Vitamin C excessive can cause kidney stones. So these are not without side effects, but if taken in small quantities, if you do wish to take them, because I have to write something and send you back home for a mild disease, you may take them, but they are optional. They have no defined benefit. The next medicine is hydroxychloroquine. It was a very popular medicine last year, but again, it is not to be given because all studies currently show that HCQ has more side effects and minuscule or no benefit. There are 2 antibiotics which are very popular with the prescriptions today, like doxycycline and azithromycin. Personally speaking, I do not write doxycycline or azithromycin. Remember, this is a virus. It's not a bacteria. Antibiotics kill bacteria. They don't kill viruses. Doxycycline and azithromycin have no role in the treatment of COVID. You should not take them. If you're taking them, you're just taking them. You're not getting any benefit from COVID. Now let me come to ivermectin. Now ivermectin is a very interesting medicine. It's actually an anti-helminthic medicine. That means that it is a medicine which is used to kill worms. But there are anecdotal evidence is there that ivermectin may have some beneficial antiviral effect. At the moment, the jury is out whether ivermectin should be taken. The Goa government has decided to give ivermectin to its whole population, 12 milligrams once a week for 4 weeks, but the WHO has strongly opposed that. Currently, the thinking is that ivermectin is the lesser of the evils. It has lesser side effects as compared to doxy, azithro, FabiFlu. You may take 12 milligrams once a day for 3 days, but technically speaking, we have no evidence whether it works or it doesn't work. So if you want to take ivermectin 12 milligrams once a day for 3 days, you may, but I do not really think that it works. But it is something which is probably with lesser side effects than HCQ, etc. So you may take it. Lastly, FabiFlu. FabiFlu, we are giving a massive dose of FabiFlu. Tons and tons of tablets have to be eaten of FabiFlu. 3,600 milligrams on day 1, followed by 1,600 milligrams from day 2. Remember, you're popping in 9 to 18 pills every day. So 9 tablets in the morning, 8 tablets in the evening. So you're taking a massive medicine. And now FabiFlu is known to cause liver damage. It's known to cause kidney damage. It's known to cause acidity. FabiFlu was initially developed by the Japanese to treat swine flu, not to treat COVID. But the evidence with FabiFlu came and went. Initially, they said FabiFlu is very effective, take it. But the current theory is that FabiFlu probably doesn't work, so we don't need to take it. So if you have a mild disease and your prescription has all these medicines, I would suggest, number 1, take lots of water. Number 2, take as good a diet as possible. Number 3, have coconut water, have juice, be in a well-aerated, well-ventilated room. Number 5, you may take a Dolo 650 if you get a fever or a headache. I do not want you to take too much of vitamin C, vitamin D and zinc, but if you want to, you may take vitamin C once a day, Limsi. You can take Zinconia or you can take Zincovit once a day. Vitamin D should be taken weekly only, not every day. I again repeat, taking vitamin D daily has side effects. You can take it weekly for 1 or 2 weeks if you want. Hydroxychloroquine, a big no. Doxycycline, a big no. Azithromycin, a big no. Ivermectin, if you want to take something, maybe ivermectin, but the jury is up on this. Nobody knows if it works or it doesn't work. Fabiflu, as per today, it should not be taken. Maybe the evidence may come in the future where they say that Fabiflu may be taken, but at the moment it is also a no. So out of all this, maybe just ivermectin. Other than that, nothing else, and a good diet. May I go to the next slide? Timer. Okay, I'm just going to go through a few slides very quickly. This is the phase which shows the viral phase and the inflammation phase. The first phase is the viral phase and the second phase is the inflammation phase. Can I go ahead, please, quickly? I'll just go through my slides. Yeah, next slide, please. Next, please. Yeah. Again, this is the same slide which I was trying to initiate that. In the initial phase, you don't do anything, but as you're going into the second phase, there are 3 medicines that you see mentioned below: remdesivir, steroids, and anticoagulants. These may be given in the second to third phase of the disease in moderate to severe patients, but in mild, they should not be taken. Next slide, please. Next, please. Okay, just a quick word on some newer medicines which are coming. I know I'm taking up more time than I should, but one is tocilizumab, the second is Regeneron, the third is a DRDO new medicine which is coming in the headlines, 2DG. Some of your family members may have been given baricitinib and ivermectin and plasma. So let me go through them very, very quickly. Remember, tocilizumab is a medicine which is given to knock out your immune system. That means then in the early phase of sick, you can give Tosi. There is no rule of Tosi mild to moderate, but you can give it if you are early phases of very sick. Remember, Tosi is very expensive. It was for 30,000, but in the black market, you're getting it for 6 or 7 lakhs. But I think the UP government has done a good job of making it available through the government sources. Second, I'm just going to talk about Regeneron. Regeneron is the Trump medicine which Trump got. It was the Trump medicine. It's basically antibodies. It's going to cost 80,000 rupees per dose. The benefit of Regeneron are monoclonal antibodies. It should be given in the first 2 or 3 days of the infection. So suppose I get the COVID today and I have high risk factors, I can take Regeneron. It's coming into India next week with Cipla. So anybody who is very old, liver, kidney disease, diabetic, hypertensive, multiple medicines going on, they can benefit from Regeneron. Remember, it's not oral, it is as an infusion. It has to be given IV over 1 to 2 hours, but it has to be done in the hospital. 80,000 rupees for 1 dose, but like Trump got it, it should show benefit. 2DG from DRDO, I'm not convinced with the evidence. This is the new medicine, 2-deoxy-D-glucose. I'm not happy with it. You may try it. Even the evidence from this is very, very minuscule. Baricitinib is another medicine which can be used in place of steroids. You may use it. It is in place of steroids. 14-day course, 1 tablet costs 3,000 rupees. 14-day course for 42,000 rupees. But they are getting a cheaper version of it today. Ivermectin is out. I mean, I mentioned already, ivermectin can be given in the mild phase, no role in moderate to severe. Plasma, let me come to plasma quickly. Plasma is basically giving antibodies to the patient. Remember, if we give antibodies to the patient, we are killing the virus. If we are killing the virus, it has to be done in the early phase of the disease. In the second phase of the disease, I've already developed my antibody, so the plasma doesn't help. I get a lot of messages that O plasma required, A plasma required, B positive plasma required. Remember, plasma, very, very less benefit. Only benefit is in the first 3 to 4 days of the disease. But in those days, you're not unwell. You're looking at giving plasma at 15 or 16 days today. It's not going to have benefit if given late in the disease. Plasma, like any blood product, has many side effects. So my suggestion is, please don't run around for plasma. Plasma is highly ineffective. It's only effective maybe in a few cases who have high risk factors in early cases of disease. So do not run for plasma. Next slide, please. Can I take 5 more minutes?
Yes,
Please,
sir.
please continue. Please continue.
Okay. So I was just rushing because I was told the time is up because of that, the problem with the internet. Okay. So I mentioned TOSI already quickly. Like I said, in severe COVID, going on to ventilation, if you want to wait, you can wait for 24 hours when you get admitted in the ICU. Try steroids. If steroids don't work, give TOSI. Remember, अगर आप बहुत बीमार हो और बहुत sick हो और ventilator पे जा रहे हो, तो TOSI जल्दी दो. अगर एक बारी lungs damage हो गई, इम्यून सिस्टम ने लंग्स को 90% डैमेज कर दिया, तो टॉसी देने का कोई फायदा नहीं है. हम नॉर्मली टॉसी और प्लाज्मा देते हैं 15वें दिन when the patient is about to die. So as a last ditch effort, we tell the family, now you run around and get me a TOSI vial and you run around and get plasma. The family runs around for 2-3 days looking for this, and when they finally arrange it by spending 5-6 lakhs, they say the patient has expired. So if you want to give TOSI, I again repeat, it is an excellent medicine, but give it at the right time. Remember, COVID is a disease of time. In the first phase, don't give steroids. If you give steroids, there will be viral replication. You will cause more damage. In the second phase, give steroids, give remdesivir, give heparin. If you're going into the third phase of severe disease, give TOSI early. Do not wait to give TOSI late in the disease. It will not work on late severe disease. Plasma, no role. Many more medicines I mentioned, no role. You can give TOSI twice. Next slide, please. Next, yeah. So this was what I was mentioning about plasma therapy. Ideal is in the first 7 days of symptoms. Remember, in the second phase, you already have antibodies. Do not give plasma. Next slide, please. This is basically that you can donate plasma 28 days after developing COVID till up to 60 days. And you should have a good titer if you want to give plasma. Otherwise, there is no point giving plasma. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to talk about a little bit about oxygen therapy, because when you end up giving oxygen at home or in the hospital, there are many devices which you see, and it's very actually confusing to see which device should be used. So the simple device is a nasal cannula, 1 to 6 liters flow in your nose, and a saturation you will achieve of 24 to 44% FiO2. Remember, our normal air has 21% oxygen. By giving a nasal cannula, you can increase it to 44% maximum. You cannot increase it more than that. Next slide, please. So when I increase the liters, for example, at home, I'm giving oxygen to a particular patient, a particular relative. If I'm giving 1 liter with a nasal cannula, I've increased my oxygen percentage to 24. And if I'm giving 6 liters, I've increased the oxygen percentage being delivered to 44%. I have to titrate the amount of liters that I'm giving to the patient with the saturation on the pulse oximeter. We are aiming at keeping the oxygen at 94, 95. We are not aiming at keeping it at 100. Remember, high doses of oxygen also cause damage. High doses of oxygen is actually a medicine. So you only give as much to keep the patient comfortable. If your patient is comfortable with 2 liters per minute and is saturating approximately 94, 95, do not go to 3, 4, 5, 6. Keep it at 2. Remember, lesser the better. Higher the oxygen, A, you will not get another cylinder after this, and B, your patient will have very minimal benefit beyond 94, 95. 94, 95, he was there without oxygen. So with oxygen, it's okay to keep him at 94, 95. Next slide, please. Suppose the oxygen is not working, then we can increase and we can use something with a plastic mask. So this is something that you may have seen as well. I'm just explaining what devices are available. Next slide, please. Suppose your patient doesn't respond to nasal cannula, your patient doesn't respond to oxygen mask, then the third way of giving it is something known as a rebreathing mask. So you see it's an oxygen mask with a reservoir, and we have to give higher flows of oxygen, 10 to 15 liters, and we can give higher percentage of oxygen to the patient. So there's a funny mask which looks very funny, which has a reservoir attached. So initially give nasal prongs. If it's not responding, give an oxygen mask. If it's not responding, give a mask with a reservoir. Next slide, please. If the reservoir is not working, now you go to the hospital that even with a reservoir mask, I'm not achieving saturation. Saturation is staying less than 90. I'm not achieving 92, 93 with high flows as well. Then I can go to the hospital and they will start you something known as HFNO. It is not a ventilator. It is known as a high frequency oxygen delivery by nasal cannulas. So high flow nasal delivery of oxygen, it is basically a fancier device as compared to a nasal cannula, but it gives you oxygen at a higher flow, 60 to 80 liters per minute. Remember, your cylinder will get over in 4-5 hours. This can only be done with a machine. It gives humidified oxygen. So before we put you onto the ventilator, the doctor will tell you, I have put you on a high flow nasal oxygen delivery system. It's called the HFNC, high flow nasal cannula. So this is just to let you know that something like this exists, and this is not a ventilator. Next slide. Now your patient has failed. You have failed in your nasal cannula, nasal oxygen mask, reservoir mask, and now your HFNC has failed. Now you will go on to ventilation. Remember, when you use a ventilator, there are two types of ventilation: non-invasive ventilation and invasive. Non-invasive is where they put the ventilator with a high pressure mask on your face, highly uncomfortable. And this can be, but this has the benefit that there is no tube down your throat. This is known as a non-invasive ventilation. And the next slide please, is known as invasive ventilation. So at home, what you can do is that you can start with a nasal cannula. You can go up to 4 or 5 liters per minute. If it's not working, you can go on to a face mask or a face mask with a reservoir. And if that is not working, they will take you to the hospital. In the hospital, they will give you oxygen through a high flow nasal cannula. If that doesn't work, they will move you on to something known as ventilation, but non-invasive. That will be with a mask which is very tightly attached to your face. And if that doesn't work, you will go on to invasive ventilation. Why I wanted to show all this to you is that for a lay person, even a high flow nasal cannula is ventilated pe laga diya. It's not like that. Your ventilation is right at the end. They are going to do many more things before you go onto the ventilator. And in 99% of the patients, you will be okay on a high flow nasal cannula, and maybe less than 1% will require non-invasive or invasive ventilation. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. We'll just go quickly. Next slide. This was the same thing. Okay. Now, this is just a word on proning. Remember, proning and changing your position will help you in breathing. Remember, if I change your position to your tummy or I put you laterally, then certain areas of the lungs will get ventilated. When I'm lying on my back all the time, the posterior portions of my lung, the basal areas of my lung don't get oxygen. So when I lie down on my tummy, the basal areas are right on top now and they get better ventilation. So if at home you are giving oxygen to your patient at 2 liters or 3 liters and you change the position of the patient, give him some tummy time, give him some lateral time, the need for going to the hospital will go down and your saturation will go up from 90 to 97, 98. So just by changing the position of the patient from prone position to left lateral to right lateral, you can buy time before you go into the hospital. So again, you may have heard about proning position. This just tells you what it is. So my suggestion to you is that if somebody is feeling very uncomfortable at home, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, you don't know what to do, you can't rush to a hospital, change the position of the patient, make him lie down on his tummy, make him sit up, make him lie left or right lateral. This will aerate areas of the lungs. Areas of the lungs will receive oxygen which were not receiving it. And therefore his saturation will improve and his lungs will open up. Next slide, please. This is what we can do at home. You don't require a hospital for this. So you can make the person lie on the tummy. You can put a pillow under the tummy, make the person comfortable. He can have nasal prongs with low grade oxygen running in, but your need for going on to a higher mode of oxygen delivery is cut down. Next slide, please. Okay, these are various awake proning positions which you can do. You can do tummy position, left, right, lateral, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, now just a word on isolation and follow-up, just 2-3 words. This is something which everybody asks me. So number 1 is कि पहले तो कितनी देर के लिए हमें isolation में रखना है. So अगर आपको mild disease है तो आपको 10 days के लिए isolation में रहना है. Last 2 to 3 days you should not have fever without medicine. So अगर मेरे को सिर्फ थोड़ा सा mild खांसी जुकाम हुआ, body ache हुई, at 10 days if I have had no fever from day 7, 8, 9, 10 without medicine, I can come out of the room on day 10. अगर मेरे को मॉडरेट डिजीज थी, मुझे मे बी स्टीरॉइड्स भी मिले थे, मुझे मे बी थोड़ी सी ऑक्सीजन भी मिली थी, आई मे बी एट होम, आई मे नॉट हैव गॉट हॉस्पिटलाइज्ड, I will have to remain in isolation till 14 to 17 days. So for mild disease, 10 days, and last 3 days, no fever. For moderate disease, even if I've been at home or in the hospital, 14 to 17 days isolation is appropriate. Should I test before I come out of the room? No, no test is required. Remember, the virus goes down by day 7, day 8 in your body. So you don't need to do an RT-PCR before you come out. Now a particular person says, मैंने तो RT-PCR करा लिया sir, day 14 पे भी और वो भी positive आ गया. Now what should I do? I've been okay for the last 7 days. Remember, the RT-PCR can stay positive for 3 months after you get this virus. Some amount of dead virus will remain in your throat. So that means that अगर मैंने टेस्ट कराया 14वें दिन और मेरा पॉजिटिव आया, फिर भी मैं आइसोलेशन से निकलूंगा, और मेरा नेगेटिव आया, फिर भी मैं आइसोलेशन से निकलूंगा. So what was the point of getting an RT-PCR at day 14? Okay, so there is no point getting an RT-PCR done. It can be negative, it can be positive. It can remain positive for 3 months after you get COVID also, but that is not a transmissible virus. It is only dead RNA of the virus in your lungs. Remember, lungs are always damaged in COVID. अगर आपको moderate disease हुई है, आपने अपना CT scan कराया है, 12, 10, 11 स्कोर आई है आपकी, तो आपकी lungs में 20, 30, 40% damage हुआ है. And there is sometimes subclinical damage. That means that you were feeling a little uncomfortable. You never got a CT scan done, but there has been some lung damage. So you cannot, as soon as you recover, decide that tomorrow I will go to the gym. Tomorrow I will do a 5-kilometer run or a 10-kilometer cycling. You cannot do that because your lungs need time to recover. There is always some subclinical damage. You don't need to be on a ventilator to have lung damage. So you can have some subclinical damage in your lungs, will always be there. Second thing is that there is always subclinical myocarditis. That means थोड़ा सा virus heart तक भी पहुंचता है. You may not have symptoms. थोड़ा सा heart rate बढ़ा होगा during the illness. Now I suddenly decide that I am a bodybuilder and I start going to the gym. I can have a heart attack when I'm in the gym, or I can collapse over there. So my suggestion is that if you decide to do exercise after COVID, ideally you should not. You can do mild, gentle walking, but you should not do heavy exercise. If you are doing, please do it under supervision, number 1. And number 2, it is very important to make sure that all your parameters are okay before you decide to become a bodybuilder. The next question is, vaccination कब लगाएं sir? अब तो injection अब तो COVID हो गया है. So after COVID, you recover of COVID. If it is mild COVID, 1 month after recovery, you can take an injection. But अगर आपको हॉस्पिटल में बहुत हाई डोज स्टीरॉइड्स मिले थे, या आपको प्लाज्मा मिला था, या आपको हाई डोज ऑफ टॉसिलिजुमैब मिला था, then you cannot take the vaccine for 3 months after recovery. The government of India is coming out with a newer recommendation that 6 months tak mat do, but that is more because they have less supply and not to do with science. Science says that you can take mild disease 1 month and moderate to severe disease 3 months after the disease. And last word on the black fungus. Initially, everybody started to use steroids. The magic dexamethasone, the magic Medrol was being given. Now everybody is scared of using it because of the black fungus. Yes. Hello. Yeah. Hello. So the fungus. Now remember, this mucor microbiome is basically a black fungus. It starts in our nose from our sinuses and it can spread into the eye and to the brain. Remember, who will get the black fungus? Somebody who's been very sick in COVID, who's had very, very high doses of steroids, who got tocilizumab, who got other immunomodulator medicines, who is a diabetic, who has other health conditions. These are the people who are more predisposition to develop the black fungus. Remember, when the immunity goes down, this black fungus comes in. Normally also the spores of this black fungus are around, but our immune system kills it. But in people who've been depressed because of COVID, because of the COVID illness and the medicines, the black fungus has shown a resurgence. So my suggestion to you is use steroids judiciously. Try to do a 5-day course of the steroids, not a 10-day course of the steroids. Try to use steroids in the minimal dose as required. Be guided by a physician. Don't rush into high dose of steroids or steroids in the first 5-6 days. All I'm suggesting is that use if required. If you do not require it and you have mild disease with normal CRPs, please do not take steroids. They will cause problems later on. Remember, no medicine is without side effects. Next slide, please. I'll just take 2 or 3 more minutes because these are common questions. We are commonly asked, are there any contraindications to vaccination? So remember, at the moment, less than 18 years, you're not allowed to take vaccination. but Pfizer in the US has started vaccinating 12 years onwards. Hopefully in India also in the near future, we will have studies which support vaccination. Bharat Biotech has started to do a study from 2 to 18 years. So hopefully in the next 3-4 months, we will have some data. And if we have enough vaccine, we will be able to vaccinate children as well. Second contraindication is pregnancy. We do not know whether this vaccine is safe or unsafe. US and UK have allowed this vaccine during pregnancy, but with a consent, you sign and take the shot. My suggestion is if it's a high risk case, for example, it's a doctor or a healthcare provider or somebody with more illnesses who's going to be exposed to the virus, they may take the vaccine during pregnancy. The others can still hold on and wait for better evidence. During lactation, whether to take or not to take, I do not think there are any side effects of taking it during lactation. But again, the government of India hasn't given us the verdict as of today. Last UI meeting suggested that they will come out with a recommendation in this week or next week, whereby they will tell us whether we can do it in lactation. But technically speaking, it appears to be safe in lactation. So again, it is your personal opinion and your personal decision. Number 3, what is the contraindication? If you had a severe anaphylaxis to the first dose, मतलब आपको बहुत severe reaction हुआ था first dose में, जैसे Pfizer और Moderna में हुआ है, then you don't take the second dose of the vaccine, obviously. And lastly, अगर आपको plasma मिला है, IVIG मिला है, strong medicines मिली हैं, high dose steroids मिले हैं during your stay in the hospital of COVID, you can postpone the vaccination by 3 months. Now the issue of blood clots. Remember, blood clots are extremely rare. There is a higher risk of blood clots if you are a smoker. There is a higher risk of blood clots if you are pregnant. There's a higher risk of blood clots if you have COVID. So blood clots can happen in many illnesses as well. So blood clots with COVID vaccination are extremely rare. When do they happen? If they do happen at all, yes, they can happen with the Covishield. So अगर आपको बहुत tension है blood clots की, you can take the Covaxin or you can take the Sputnik V. But as such, also with Covishield, it has been allowed in the UK, it's been allowed in Europe, and they have said that the incidence is 1 in lakhs. So incidence is very minimal. You can go ahead and take the vaccine without any worry. Now, if you want to ask me कि अगर blood clot होगा तो क्या होगा? Blood clots normally form 1 to 3 weeks after vaccination. That means अगर मुझे आज vaccination लगा है और मुझे कल बाजू में दर्द हो रहा है, I'm getting a COVID arm or I get a fever or a headache, that is not a blood clot happening. Blood clots will normally happen after a week if they have to happen, and maximum up to 3 weeks. That means if I got the injection on the 1st of January, I can get the blood clots from the 7th to the 21st of January. So जो शुरू के 3-4 days में symptoms होंगे, that will not be because of blood clots. That will be linked with the vaccine and the vaccine side effects, which are generally minimal. Now, after a week of the injection, if I get a severe headache, or if I get a severe tightness of my chest, or if I get a severe pain in my leg, which would mean that there is a blood clot in my brain, or a blood clot in my chest, in my pulmonary vessels, or I have a clot in my veins of my legs. That means throbbing headache, tightness of chest, breathing difficulty, or swelling of my legs. That means you got a blood clot. Now you rush to the hospital, we have something known as TPA, which will dissolve the clot. Remember, it is not incurable. So अगर आपको थोड़ा सा भी symptom after vaccination, after 1 to 2 weeks ऐसा लगता है कि I have throbbing headache, tightness chest, swelling of the legs, any of these 3 symptoms, you rush to the hospital, you get yourself the medicine, the clot will dissolve, you will be fine. Remember, they can be treated. So if you go to the hospital on time, it can be treated. Very rare, agar hoga, so it can be treated. So my suggestion is that do not let blood clots hamper your vaccination. Lastly, a very common question asked to all of us is, sir, antibody करा ले, injection लगा लिया है, हम देखना चाहते हैं कि हमारे अंदर कितनी protection है. Remember, suppose your antibody titers are low, you cannot still get a vaccination. And suppose your antibody titers are high, you may still get COVID. So even after vaccination, you have to wear a mask, you have to take the same social distancing precaution, you have to do the same sanitization. So SMS तो आपने करना ही है. Antibody करके आपने सिर्फ टेंशन लेनी है कि मेरी antibody 30 है, मेरे neighbor की antibody 40 है, he has better protection, I have less protection, I will get COVID, he will not get COVID. So my suggestion is don't give yourself any stress. The antibody titers have no correlation with our immunity. We do not even have a cutoff. इस cutoff के beyond आपको COVID नहीं होगा. We do not even have that. So my suggestion is that don't stress yourself and waste your money doing antibody titers. After vaccination, हम ये प्रिज्यूम करेंगे कि 3 weeks after your second shot, you should be protected in maximum number of cases. And number 2, if you continue to take SMS precautions, you should not catch COVID again after getting the vaccination. Next slide, please. Okay, now one little question about pregnancy and newborn baby. Okay, so generally COVID in pregnancy is safe. Remember, the placenta does not have the ACE receptors for the virus to cross from mother to baby. So अगर pregnancy में मुझे COVID होता है, तो I will not transfer the virus to my baby. My baby will remain safe. It cannot be transferred to the baby, so usually it is safe. But suppose the mother falls very sick because of COVID. She has a lot of breathing problem. She needs oxygen. She has a lot of other issues. So she may deliver a premature baby. So because of the mother falling very sick, which may happen in a few cases, there may be prematurity, not because of COVID in the baby, because of maternal indication. So pregnancy बहुत safe है COVID में. अगर आपको कोविड हो भी जाता है, मेजॉरिटी में आप सेफ रहोगे. ओनली प्रॉब्लम इज अगर सीवियर कोविड होता है प्रेग्नेंट वुमन को, तो शी मे बी टेकन इनटू द लेबर रूम एंड आस्क्ड टू डिलीवर द बेबी बिकॉज शी कैन नॉट बी मैनेज्ड विदाउट दैट. So as such, pregnancy is safe. So if any of your colleagues are pregnant and they catch COVID, tell them you will not get a baby who has problems. You will not get a deformed, a teratogenic baby. You will get a normal baby, maybe premature, but will be normal. Remember, ये सारी medicines, Fabiflu, Remdesivir, Ivermectin, ये सारी doxycycline, they cannot be given to pregnant women. So if a pregnant woman gets COVID, all she takes is a paracetamol, good diet, and we treat it like mild COVID. अगर problem बढ़ती है, we give them oxygen and steroids, but we cannot give them any other medicine. Breastfeeding after delivery हम continue करते हैं. We tell the mother to wear a mask, a face shield, and wash your hands and breastfeed your baby. There is no problem with breastfeeding and COVID. So even if the mother has COVID, she can breastfeed her baby. अगर आपको कोविड है तो सिजेरियन या नॉर्मल डिलीवरी ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. इट इज नॉट इंडिकेटेड कि अगर माइल्ड कोविड है तो मैंने सिजेरियन करना है. यू कैन जॉली वेल डू अ नॉर्मल डिलीवरी, but अगर आपको सिवियर कोविड है then they might do a cesarean. And remember, at the time of discharge they will do a COVID test in your baby at 48 hours. अगर वो नेगेटिव आता है तो बेबी नेगेटिव है, और उसके बाद अगर बेबी कोविड कैच करता है, दैट इज बिकॉज ऑफ फैमिली मेंबर्स, जैसे किसी और को होता है एरोसॉल, बाय टच, एक्सेट्रा. So there is nothing that the baby is more predisposition can catch COVID, but that is if you take SMS precaution, then there is probably lesser risk. Plus breastfeeding अगर mother कराती है, तो mother will transfer antibodies of COVID to the newborn baby, जिससे baby को protection मिलेगी against COVID. Last slide, please. Okay. Sorry, I had to rush through the presentation. Actually, there's so much data on COVID that I can go on talking for many hours.
Thank you so much, sir. And this was indeed an intriguing and a valuable session. So as our audience has been waiting for a lot of time to interact with you, we will quickly move on to the question and answer session. And to invite the first question, I would request our campus director, Dr. Bhagwan Jagwani, to present his question to you first.
Yeah, thank you, Priyanka. Dr. Shravan, I must say that it was a very useful information sharing from your side in terms of clearing our doubts so far as this pandemic is concerned, and it was explained very simply by you. Hats off to your lucid style of explanation. Now, I have a couple of questions actually. My first question is, the Western countries are exploring possibilities of cocktail vaccination, where the first vaccine may be of Covishield and the second vaccine may be Sputnik. What is your take on that? So
technically, it's a very good idea because we will get exposed to both. So they are doing a study where they are using Covishield as a first dose and Sputnik as a second, because the concept is both of them is the same, that they are adenovirus vector vaccines. So the concept is good, but my suggestion to everybody is that do not mix and match as of now. Till we have better data, we should not do it. I also suggest that whatever vaccine that we are giving today, we will get a booster by the year end. Novavax is coming out with a newer vaccine. Even Serum is working on the newer variants. So like the flu vaccine, just like our flu vaccine is that we get a new shot every year of the variant. We will be getting a booster of Covaxin and Covishield probably by the year end. So I think that at the moment, the take-home message should be take the same vaccine, whatever you have received, and hopefully we will have a booster of the same or another vaccine by the year end, and we will have better data. Remember, it's an evolving disease. Nobody knows what is right and what is wrong. So at the moment, no mix and match. If you're going for Sputnik, just go for Sputnik. If you're going for Covishield, just go for Covishield. Whatever you get, you take. Do not worry about clots. They can be managed and they are extremely rare. And 18 crore Indians have been vaccinated and the adverse effects have been very, very minimal. So do not worry, be confident and go ahead and get the shot.
Thank you, sir. The second question, in fact, I'm not trying to kill on others' time, but yes, one question more I would like to ask. It's a case. It's a very close case in my family. April 1 got vaccinated by Covishield.
Okay.
April 5 lost smell and taste.
Okay.
D-dimer test 0.94. CRP over 40. Pulse oximeter 90. Then a pulmonologist took care of the case. No hospitalization, but then there are mixed feelings now. Now the case is recovered, but the mixed feelings are, number one, you got vaccinated, you did not go out anywhere, that's okay. But because of vaccination, these things have happened.
Okay.
And then when the patient says that I was not hospitalized, then the remarks come that since you got vaccinated, that is the reason you did not get hospitalized.
Okay.
So mixed reactions.
Yeah, so let me come to that. See, number one, this vaccine doesn't have the COVID virus in it. So if you give the Covaxin virus, it is the killed virus, so it doesn't have the virus in it, so it cannot cause COVID in you. And the Covishield vaccine is a adenovirus. Adenovirus is a Zukam wala virus, very, very mild virus, which has some genetical component of the COVID in it. अगर मैं Covishield रहता हूँ, मेरा RT-PCR negative रहेगा. I will not become RT-PCR because of my COVID vaccine, because this is not a live virus. It is an adenovirus which is carrying some gene, the spike protein gene of the COVID virus. So it is not a live vaccine. It is not going to cause COVID in you. We are not injecting the COVID live virus into you. You will not get RT-PCR. But what happens is that when you go to get an injection to the hospital, there are long lines. And you probably, when that gentleman went on April 1st to get the shot, the patient got exposed to a virus from another person who was an asymptomatic carrier in the hospital or in the line who was waiting. He got the virus and the vaccine, came back home. In 4 or 5 days, that was the incubation period, the virus multiplied and he had symptoms. Now, this particular vaccine will only show benefit 3 weeks after 2 shots. 1 shot is better than no shots, but your immunity will best be after 3 weeks of second shot. So after 1 shot, the patient had no immunity in 4 or 5 days to the vaccine. So as a result of that, that patient developed COVID as per whatever he was destined to develop. The vaccine did not make the disease less. The vaccine did not make the disease more, because it was only a 5-day interval. So according to me, even if he hadn't got the vaccine, he would have recovered at home, because the vaccine and the gap was very little. 5-6 days, the vaccine will not give you immunity. And he probably got the virus when he went to the hospital. So if you're going to the hospital to get the vaccine, I suggest to most of my patients, please go to the private sector, pay a little more, but get it done hygienically if you can afford it. Because in the government sector, at least in Punjab, the lines are massive. And there is no social distancing being maintained. And I think a lot of COVID has spread from those lines itself.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you, sir. So moving on to the questions from some of the participants, we have Pragya Pandey ma'am, who would like to ask the question, and she would want to know what are the chances of people who have treated themselves at home to get black fungus.
Okay, so remember, like I said, black fungus will come in any person who has low immunity because of COVID. Now, when do you have low immunity? You have low immunity if you have taken high dose of steroids at home without the doctor's prescription. So majority of the patients at home, because their neighbor took steroids, they start steroids. There is not really indicated, and as a result of that, their immune system is going down. So if you are elderly, if you are diabetic, if you have taken high doses of steroids at home, you may develop black fungus 2 to 3 weeks after recovering from the disease. Generally, it is for sicker patients, somebody who's been in the hospital and who's got even higher doses of steroids, who's got TOSI, who's got other things, would develop black fungus. Also, they say that the black fungus spores may come from dirty cylinders. So if they've been using an oxygen cylinder, which they bought from the black market, and is giving them some dirty oxygen, so that also may result in delivering of the spores. Remember, black fungus is extremely rare. We've only had 22 cases of the black fungus in Punjab. That's it. We've had lakhs of COVID cases, but only 22 cases of black fungus. Remember, you would be very, very unfortunate to develop the black fungus, one. Number two, if you develop any signs of headache, any signs of eye pain, any signs of pain along your sinus area, any black color thrusting along your nose, immediately go to the ENT or the hospital and let them debride you, remove that black fungus and start you on amphotericin B. Do not stay at home for longer and let the black fungus proliferate. But that doesn't mean that every headache is a black fungus. So if you have recovered from COVID and you were a diabetic who had steroids and you develop, again, I repeat, throbbing headache, eye pain, pain along the sinuses, or any blackish discoloration or crusting at your nose, then you should go and get checked for the black fungus.
Thank you so much, sir. So another very interesting question that we have from Mr. Ravjeet Mahajan. He is asking, can a cancer patient be vaccinated?
Yes, a cancer patient can be vaccinated. You can get the vaccine. There is no problem. Your immune system has been depressed because of your cancer medication. If you catch COVID, you are going to be a very, very high risk COVID, and you have high chances of getting into trouble and getting into a severe disease because your immune system is already low because of the anti-cancer medicines. I agree. If I give the COVID vaccine to two patients, one is a cancer patient and one is a normal immunity patient, the cancer patient will develop lesser antibodies, but at least will develop some antibodies. So my suggestion to any cancer patient is, please go ahead, get the shot done. This vaccine will not cause any trouble in you because it is a killed vaccine. It's not going to cause any trouble. It will only give you some benefit, maybe not as much as a healthy adult, but definitely some benefit. Go ahead and get vaccinated.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, I've got a few requests from a few of my faculty colleagues who would like to ask the question. I would first like to invite Dr. Sanjeev Mishra. Sir, you may ask a question if you have one.
Good evening, sir. Thanks a lot. We got very vital information. My question is that nowadays we are having very asthma patients, especially kids and teenagers. As we know that the precaution is better than cure, what should be the precaution for these kids or teenagers to avoid any complication?
Okay, so the first thing is that in an asthma patient, if a patient comes to my clinic and he's coughing, it is very difficult to differentiate he's coughing because of asthma or he's coughing because of COVID. Now the mother tells me, sir, ये मौसम बदला है, कल बारिश हुई थी, इसने आइसक्रीम खा ली, आपको तो पता है इसको एलर्जी है, तो इसको ये खांसी एलर्जी वाली ही है. Now my suggestion to this mother is, please do not consider anything to be not COVID unless proven. ठीक है? So अगर आपने प्रूव नहीं किया तो आप इसे कोविड मान के चलोगे. अगर हम इसको टेस्ट करा के कोविड नेगेटिव कहते हैं, then he is not COVID, but anything that you will treat as COVID only, because आज की डेट में 90% जो पेशेंट्स आ रहे हैं उनको कोविड ही है. So पहली बात है कि कोविड कैन प्रेजेंट विद एनी सिम्टम अपार्ट फ्रॉम प्रेगनेंसी. दैट मींस कोविड में आपको दुनिया का कोई भी सिम्टम हो सकता है प्रेग्नेंट छोड़ के. राइट? सो आपके बच्चे को खांसी हुई और आप मेरे पास आए हो, मैं पहली चीज आपको बोलूंगा कि आप इसको आइसोलेशन में रखो, इसको अपने दादी दादा के पास मत जाने दो, क्योंकि वो पेरेंट्स से मुझे पता है टेस्ट नहीं करवाना, क्योंकि उन्होंने यही मान के चलना कि इसको अस्थमा है. सो आई विल टेल देम, आप चलो टेस्ट नहीं करवा रहे, आप इससे घर लेके जाओ, इसको आइसोलेशन में रखो, इसको अपनी दादा दादाजी के पास मत जाने दो. रिमेंबर, अगर वो अपने ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स के पास जाएगा और ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स को कोविड होगा तो बहुत सीवियर कोविड होगा. Our message is always कि मदर और फादर अपने पास बच्चे को रखें, दादी दादा को आइसोलेट करें जब तक हमें प्रूफ नहीं मिलता कि ये कोविड नहीं है. नंबर 2, मैं उसका इलाज शुरू करूंगा लाइक एस्थमा. आई विल स्टार्ट हिम ऑन अ ब्रोंकोडायलेटर, कफ मेडिसिन एक्सेट्रा एंड वेट एंड वॉच. एस्थमा में भी एंटीबायोटिक नहीं देना, कोविड में भी एंटीबायोटिक नहीं देना. सो मैं माइल्ड डिजीज कोविड को और माइल्ड डिजीज एस्थमा को एक बराबर ट्रीट करता हूँ. So I will continue to isolate and give cough medicines to this baby and wait and watch. अगर उसको फीवर आना शुरू होगा तो इसका मतलब एस्थमा नहीं है, एस्थमा में फीवर नहीं आता है, उसको कोविड है, उसका टेस्ट कराएंगे. अगर फीवर नहीं नहीं आता और उसके दादी दादाजी से 10 दिन के लिए आइसोलेट करो अगर आपने टेस्ट नहीं कराया। Now there are two children. One is an asthmatic child, one is a normal child. एक की लंग्स डैमेज्ड है, एक की लंग्स नॉर्मल है। दोनों को कोविड होगा तो ऑब्वियसली जिसकी लंग्स कॉम्प्रोमाइज्ड हैं उसको ज्यादा कोविड होगा एज कंपेयर टू द नॉन एस्थमेटिक। रिमेंबर, बच्चों में कम बीमारी क्यों होती है? क्योंकि उनमें बीमारियां हैं नहीं, उनकी लंग्स अच्छी हैं, लिवर अच्छा है, हार्ट अच्छा है। अब अगर एक बच्चे में कोमॉर्बिडिटी है, उसको एस्थमा है, उसको लिवर की प्रॉब्लम है, उसका हार्ट ऑपरेशन हुआ है, उसकी किडनीज खराब है, तो वो तो अडल्ट कैटेगरी में आ गया ना, तो वो उस कैटेगरी में आ गया तो उसके अंदर कॉम्प्लिकेशन भी ज्यादा है। तो इस मदर को मैं ये भी बोलूंगा कि आप अपने बच्चे पे ज्यादा तवज्जो दो, इसको आप सैचुरेशन देखो, इसको आप मॉनिटर करो। अगर आपको लगता है कि इसकी खांसी बहुत बढ़ रही है, बुखार तेज आ रहा है, सैचुरेशन बॉर्डर लाइन लग रही है, तो फिर आप इसको हॉस्पिटल लेके जाओ और वहां पर हम इसका टेस्ट करेंगे, ऑक्सीजन देंगे एंड व्हाटएवर एल्स। एंड रिमेंबर, स्टीरॉइड्स कैन बी यूज्ड फॉर बोथ कोविड एंड अस्थमा। सो अगर हम स्टीरॉइड्स देते भी हैं 4-5 दिन के बाद तो दोनों बीमारियों में फायदा होगा।
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, before I move on to the other questions, one specific question that I would like to ask: in case a child around 8 to 9 years has suffered from a high fever and has not gone for a COVID test, but has gone through some blood tests, and the blood tests have indicated that there is a rise in the SGPT and SGOT level to between 250 to 300. So do we consider it as a COVID case, and how should we go about treating it?
Okay, so remember, if you had asked me this question 2 years back, I would have treated it as any normal illness. I would have done the blood test like blood culture. If the SGOT, SGPT was raised, I would have done liver function test. I would have looked for whether he has jaundice and other things. But in today's situation, any child who comes to me with high grade fever, 99% it is COVID. I'll tell you why. Because पहले क्या था कि बच्चे बाहर जाते थे तो बाहर का पानी पीते थे, बाहर की बर्थडे पार्टी के लिए जाते थे, स्कूल में दूसरे बच्चों के कांटेक्ट में आते थे, बच्चे बाहर जाके ट्यूशन के लिए जाते थे, तो उनको इन्फेक्शन मिलती थी। अब बच्चा पिछले 1 साल से घर में बैठा है, आरओ का पानी पी रहा है, बाहर का खाना नहीं खा रहा है, बिल्कुल मदर ने उसको बाहर खेलने से भी रोका हुआ है। अगर इस बच्चे को तो और कोई इन्फेक्शन हो ही नहीं सकती, he will not catch typhoid, malaria, dengue, hepatitis because he's not going out of the house. The only thing he can catch is that he can catch COVID from an asymptomatic parent. That means servant से या parent से या किसी और से वो asymptomatic COVID catch कर सकता है. So first of all, this patient I will tell them isolate. Again, I repeat, बड़ों को घर से इसमें isolate करना है because remember, बच्चों में COVID mild है, mother father में COVID mild है, जो बूढ़े घर में उनमें कोविड सिवियर है। इफ यू आर एज मोर देन 50 इयर्स यू हैव हायर रिस्क, दे आर नॉट इवन वैक्सीनेटेड, सो हम उसको पहले तो बाकी बड़ों से उसको अलग रखेंगे। मदर विल स्टे विद द चाइल्ड, द रेस्ट एवरीबॉडी विल बी सेपरेट। Number 2, we will wait and watch for a day or so. If the mother is keen to get a COVID test done, I would like to get it done because remember I said कि RT-PCR डे 1 में सबसे ज्यादा चांस है पॉजिटिव आएगा। अगर मैं उसको बाद में देखता हूं तो उसका RT-PCR नेगेटिव हो सकता है। सो अगर मदर अगर कन्विंस हो जाती है तो आई वुड रिक्वेस्ट हर यू डू एन RT-PCR। इफ इट कम्स नेगेटिव then I may consider a different diagnosis, but if it comes positive then I will consider it as COVID. Now I will tell you two things. Remember, आज की डेट में अगर आप RT-PCR कराते हो तो उसको रिपोर्ट आने में 2 से 3 दिन लग जाते हैं। So my suggestion to everybody that you should do a rapid antigen test. It will pick up 50% of COVID. अगर आपका रैपिड एंटीजन टेस्ट पॉजिटिव है तो आपका कोविड निकल आया, आप उसका इसी तरह से कोविड का इलाज करो। अगर रैपिड एंटीजन टेस्ट कराया और वो नेगेटिव है पर मुझे बहुत शक है कि इसको कोविड है तो मैं RT-PCR करा लूंगा। अगर RT-PCR भी नेगेटिव आता है मैं फिर से RT-PCR कराऊंगा, और अगर 2 बारी RT-PCR कराने के बाद नेगेटिव आता है और फिर भी मुझे कोविड का शक है तो मैं CT स्कैन कराऊंगा। Remember the rule is 1 rapid antigen test. If it is negative, RT-PCR, फिर भी नेगेटिव 1 more RT-PCR, फिर भी नेगेटिव CT टेस्ट अगर मुझे बहुत हाई रिस्क लग रहा है। बिकॉज देखो RT-PCR भी 70% केसेस को पकड़ता है, 30% नहीं पकड़ता। और रैपिड एंटीजन टेस्ट पकड़ता है सिर्फ 40% केसेस को। अगर रैपिड एंटीजन नेगेटिव आया और मैं इस पेशेंट को बोलूंगा कि आप अपनी दादी के पास चले जाओ या नाना जी के पास चले जाओ तो सब फैमिली में कोविड फैलने का बहुत ज्यादा रिस्क हो जाएगा।
Okay, thank you so much, sir. So we'll just take up one last question from one of my faculty colleagues, my Miss Kavaljeet Kaur. She would like to ask a question related to the children. Ma'am, you may please unmute and ask.
Just a minute. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Priyanka ma'am, for giving me this opportunity. Good evening, Dr. Shravan. Sir, my question to you is, as far as our children are concerned till age 18, what preventive measures should they adopt to avoid being infected by the ongoing pandemic?
Okay. So my suggestion is, first of all, if you want to protect your child, everybody in the family should get the injection. So you form a protective bubble around your baby. अगर घर में दादा दादी को इंजेक्शन लग गया है, आपके पेरेंट्स को इंजेक्शन बच्चे के लग गया है, तो at least we have a protective bubble around the baby. So that is the first thing. Second thing, obviously, is that you don't allow the baby to go out during these pandemic days and to go out and play with neighbors, children, etc. Number 3, try to make them wear a mask if they are going out, because remember, WHO says that less than 5 years, it is very difficult to wear a mask. But I have seen that even beyond 2 years, if children are motivated, they wear a mask better than their parents. So I will get a child walking into my clinic who will be wearing a mask properly, and the father's mask will be on his chin and he will be not covering his nose. So the child is probably following rules better than the parent. So you can encourage them that if they are going out, they should follow the same precautions of sanitization, mask wearing, as well as social distancing. Children follow rules if you make it for them. If you explain it to a child, they follow rules. Unfortunately, we don't have a vaccine for children as of now. But hopefully in the next 2 or 3 months, we will get an injection. But at least if everybody around the child has been vaccinated, we will be protecting the child. As far as giving your child extra supplements like vitamins, minerals, calcium, etc., no real role per se. You can give it for overall health of a child. You can give them multivitamins, give them a good diet. I agree. But there is no real role. Zincovit is not going to prevent COVID in a child. अगर मुझे कोविड वायरस आएगा, मैंने चाहे 10 बोतलें जिंकोविट की ली हैं, मुझे कोविड हो जाएगा. ये स्ट्रेन इतना इन्फेक्शियस है. But if your child, you want to give, you can give something like Zincovit, 1 teaspoon every day. You give them coconut water, you give them a juice, etc. That can be given to the children. There is one more thing I did not mention, maybe because of shortage of time. A lot of patients come to you with a RT-PCR with a CT value. And they say CT value, matlab cycle threshold value is 12, या 14, या 15, या 18. Please ignore the CT value on the RT-PCR. It has no role in the prognosis of the disease. CT value सिर्फ बताता है कि आपके उस टाइम पे कितना वायरस था शरीर में. That means अगर मैं day 1 of symptoms पे RT-PCR कराता हूँ, I can have high virus, so low CT value. And अगर मैं day 4 या day 5 पे test कराता हूँ RT-PCR, it will come positive. But because the virus has obviously gone down, because that is the normal course of the virus, 5-6 days में घट जाता है, तो my CT value may be higher. Remember, higher CT value means lower virus. But that is only linked with the duration of illness, not with the prognosis. That means एक patient आता है, उसका CT value 20 है, 20 है, और एक patient आता है 12 है. वो 12 वाला हो सकता है 10 दिन बाद वेंटिलेटर पे चले जाए, और वो 20 वाले को माइनर सिम्टम हो और वो 4-5 दिन में ठीक हो जाए. So please ignore the CT value, that has no correlation with the severity of the disease.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. I believe this very informative session was highly beneficial for all the participants. Now, before I invite our Honorable Campus Director, I would request our Director of Allen House Colleges, Dr. Ruby Chawla ma'am, to please say a few words.
Thank you, Priyanka. Really, Dr. Shravan, it was an informative session. There was so much to learn and understand. You have cleared so many myths which we had in our minds. You speak with such a gentle and caring voice that I'm sure our audience must be at ease now. Thank you for taking out time. The points that you covered were really very important, and we all shall surely value your inputs, and we shall take care. And you too take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And now I would like to invite our Campus Director, Dr. Bhagwan Jagwani, to deliver his closing remarks.
Dr. Shravan, I was supposed to deliver the opening remarks, but when people came to know that we have with us a very accomplished pediatrician, many people joined into the Zoom session. So I couldn't get the chance to join in, but now, yes, I'm in a better position to deliver the closing remarks. Last year, when the pandemic entered our lives, we had lots of material, less of questions. This year, the story was altogether different. We had lots of questions, but rarely any material coming in front of us. And whatever limited material was published by government agencies or by a very famous university you must be aware of, the WhatsApp University, they were different advocates of that material. So we were not able to understand what is good. Just like you mentioned that have the dose after 1 month, have the dose after 3 months. A lot of confusion was there. But your session helped us to understand all the different things that we were facing in our life, all the different questions that we had in our mind. In fact, I'm sure that most of the participants would agree, 80% of your deliberation covered 100% of our questions. And 20% of your deliberation has given us the wisdom as to what to do now. So I must thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of the Allen House Colleges family that you took out some time. It was originally scheduled to be a 1-hour session, but it was so interesting that I think it is almost 2 hours. So thank you very much, Dr. Shravan. And please do give us the liberty to interact with you once again, whenever the need arises, so as to elevate our understanding of this pandemic, which as on date is still being explained by many experts. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your beautiful remarks. As we come to the end of this webinar, I would like to express my gratitude to our venerable speaker, Dr. Shravan Mehra, for his valuable inputs. I'm sure that we all shall be keeping in consideration the highlights of the topic discussed by sir today. And special thanks to our campus director of Allen House Colleges, Dr. Bhagwan Jagwani, and director of Allen House Colleges, Dr. Ruby Chawla, for their ineffable support throughout to make this webinar an enriching experience for all. I also thank my colleagues from IT department for their support. I wish to convey my thanks to all the faculty colleagues of Superhouse Education Foundation for their zealous participation. At the end, I would like to thank everyone on behalf of Allen House Colleges for their valuable presence. Take care and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.